Catchy, right?
4 movies about 4 people with fantastic powers, but the movies themselves aren't all that fantastic. Numerically speaking, there are certainly 4 of them, that's people and movies, so that part's not in dispute, just the fantastic bit. There's Stretchy, See-Through, Rocky, and Zippo the Douchebag.
Is that bad?
Taking on Doctor Doom in 4 movies that unfortunately end up as the less than fantastic 4.
It's fantastic.
Yes, it is.
Today we look at a classic superhero team in their first 4 live-action movies, though they're made with 3 different sets of creative talent and cast members. There's the Band-tastic 4, the Bland-tastic 4, the Bland-tastic 4 Surf and Safari, and the Trank-tastic 4.
What do you want me to do?
The Fantastic Four is one of Marvel Comics' headline superhero titles, but at the time of making this video in early 2025, the first 4 attempts to bring these characters to live action have all yielded mixed results.
Now I'm gonna go kill him.
A 5th film, Fantastic Four: First Steps, will be, and if you're watching this in the future, was released after this video was posted, so it's not covered here for reasons of, well, I haven't seen it, so I have no opinion on it whether it's any good or not. Fantastic Four started off as a 1961 comic about 4 people who ventured into space, and things did not go so well. Cosmic rays altered each of the quartet. Reed Richards can stretch and twist his body and limbs, and gets the nickname Mr. Fantastic. His wife, Sue Storm, can basically become invisible and form force fields. Her younger brother, Johnny, can catch on fire without a trip to the burns unit and a bulk purchase of aloe vera. And Ben Grimm becomes the Thing. Basically, a man permanently stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Well, that was the deal, right?
Fantastic Four is credited as being a co-creation of Stan Lee and artist Jack Kirby, though each has wildly conflicting accounts of how the comic came to be about. But the upshot is this: the Fantastic Four saw Timely Comics, soon to be rebranded as Marvel Comics, returning to publishing superhero comics in a big way. First published in 1961, Fantastic Four would, over time, become a decent-sized hit where it would quickly herald a new wave of comic book heroes that weren't flawless, monolithic characters, but people who had relatively relatable problems, like becoming invisible, turning on fire, that sort of thing. In short order, we'd have Spider-Man, the Hulk, X-Men, and more. So that's fantastic, amazing, incredible, and uncanny, all sewn up there. And crucially, Stan Lee's purchase of a thesaurus would now qualify as a tax deduction.
What if we got these powers for a reason? What if it's like some higher calling?
Fantastic Four would see cartoons based on the comic, but a live-action film or television series proved elusive, possibly for the reason that the Quartet superpowers were not easily realized in a live-action setting before computer-generated special effects became widely available. A few Marvel properties had live-action versions in the form of pilot movies and short-lived series, and of course the long-running hit Kenneth Johnson's Incredible Hulk series. Throughout the 80s and 90s though, Marvel would be owned by various parent companies, though over those decades the comic book publishers' fortunes would go up and down like a grasshopper's mustache. As such, they weren't in a position to turn down even small offers for the film rights to their intellectual property. The first Fantastic Four movie from 1994 is an odd one where we can't really say all that much about it since we've never seen it. It was never officially released. You can see the trailer on YouTube, or there's a very good documentary, Doomed: The Untold Story of Roger Corman's The Fantastic Four, if you want to know more. But here's a quick summary. Bernd Eichinger, which sounds really painful without treatment, was in fact a German film producer who, in the early 90s, wrangled the live-action film rights to Fantastic Four. When Eichinger's rights to the comic were about to lapse, he partnered with Roger Corman's company New Horizons to quickly pump out a very low-budget feature for around $1 to $1.5 million, which, unless you were approving Kevin Smith's credit card application, was not a lot of money for a movie in the early 90s. For comparison's sake, Albert Pune's low-rent 1990 Captain America had a budget of around $3 million. Director Oley Sassone and the Corman regulars were enthused at the idea of working on a Fantastic Four movie, despite having a budget less than the GDP of a tiny island nation of Stam Fine, population 50,000. Stam Fine's exports include ready-to-assemble furniture and the little tiny tools used to put together ready-to-assemble furniture. The cast were not huge names, but they also weren't fresh off the bus. There was Alex Hyde White, Rebecca Staab, Jay Underwood, Michael Bailey Smith, Carl Chiafalo, and Joseph Culp, among others. For most who were involved with the production, the expectation was that the film would see the light of day, or at least The dank of whatever cinemas were screening Roger Corman films in the early 90s. By late 1993, Marvel had reorganized itself and gotten really serious about big screen versions of its films, so it would prove cheaper to make a super low budget movie and then shelve it in order for Eichinger's Constantine films to extend the rights to Fantastic Four, just as 20th Century Fox was showing an interest in making a big budget Fantastic Four movie. Of course, if you're going to drop up to $100 million on a Fantastic Four movie, you probably didn't want an officially licensed but super low budget and super cheesy Fantastic Four movie muddying the water. Marvel's Ari Arvad had apparently bought the rights to the film completely in order to bury it, with a bootleg video transfer being the only way to see the complete film. So in 1994, the film's release was, appropriately enough, clobbered. Of course, for the people who made the film and appeared in it, that was, not to put too fine a point on it, a total pisser.
This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Fox's films started appearing in theatres in 2000 with the first X-Men movie, and soon there would be more Marvel films. By 2005, with Constantine Films' involvement, the Fantastic Four would return. And this time, fingers crossed, the movie would come out.
Any hotter and you're approaching supernova.
Sweet!
No, not sweet.
Sue Storm was Reed's ex and now working for Victor Von Doom, who, as seems all too familiar a situation, is a whiny and insecure billionaire who, given half a chance, will destroy whatever he cannot control. Victor has a thing for Sue, though when Reed Richards wanders back into her life, there are still unresolved issues between the pair. A mission into space in order to, well, is it really all that important? Things go a little caca. Reed Richards finds he now has stretchy limbs, where of course, there's finally something the world really needed. A joke about how Mr. Fantastic's powers might affect his penis.
He can expand any part of his anatomy.
Well, I've always found him to be a little limp.
The answer is, and hopefully this won't be bleeped too badly, he will his degree in literature of the 19th century. Ioan Grufford star in the early 2000s British television adaptation of Hornblower, and of course co-starred as Lancelot in the 2004 film King Arthur. Now, that last bit of information was unnecessary and gratuitous. But then again, so was the 2004 film King Arthur.
I want peace, Lancelot.
Sue Storm gains the power of invisibility, though since she's played by Jessica Alba in a 2005 film, her invisibility often involves her being naked for it to work. Man, I cannot believe she fell for that one. Her brother Johnny Storm wants to use their newfound celebrity to, well, just look up Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Johnny can generate heat and flames and eventually gives new meaning to the term hot mess.
Everywhere.
The Human Torch hasn't been able to crack flight yet, but he's working on it. He's also working on his brand. Side note here, who thought that anyone was ever going to take seriously a superhero played by an actor called Chris?
I don't know if that's a good idea.
Chris Evans, worst Top Gear host ever. I bet that's the last we ever see of this blonde bozo. And scene. Ben Grimm is the usual Ben Grimm, a guy who has to deal with suddenly being made out of rock, who, if nothing else, is certainly somebody that you should never ever ever let try out your new skateboard. Grimm, played by Michael Chiklis, is his usual gruff self, who's left by his fiancée but soon finds a new love in the form of Alicia, a blind artist played by Kerry Washington. Now that's what I call an upgrade. Victor Von Doom was played by Australian actor Julian McMahon, where it takes a long time for him to finally and suddenly show up dressed as Dr. Doom.
Call me Doom.
Complete with his face mask and hoodie. At no point does he take you down the pub in his Monaro for a chicken lunch. The media has labelled them all the Fantastic Four, and it will be some time before they as a group can embrace that and work together.
Wow, Dr. Phil, that's deep.
So instead of looking for a cure to their superpowers, they will instead focus on being superheroes.
Get off me, rubber boy!
You guys, quit it!
Work on the movie started, funnily and coincidentally enough, around about the time the first X-Men did really well for Fox. Several writers were engaged, as well as several directors attached to the project, before the job was eventually given to Tim Story to make a decently budgeted superhero film shot in Vancouver. Incidentally, Uncle Reg was also once shot in Vancouver, but the gunman apologised immediately. Tim Story's other films were mostly comedies, which does help in a film with a touch as light as this.
You can't fly.
Yet.
Johnny, can you put that napkin out?
Oh, Jesus.
It's not a trial run for the MCU-style movies with super fast throwaway gags. The comedy here is played like a comedy, and sometimes it works, and at other times it doesn't.
That's bad, right?
It's a very light film. There's little weighty drama, there's some action, but there's an awful lot of byplay between the characters, trying to work out what to do with their powers. Are they gifts or are they curses? The answer is somewhere in the middle.
Don't do drugs.
The superpowers here are played for laughs just as much as they're used for action. Johnny Storm, always a callow youth, is now, well, the technical term is a complete jerkwad douche nozzle. Ben is a tragic figure, and Sue and Reed are trying to reconnect without her realising that he has a bit of a nasal fetish.
That's my nose genus.
Of course, they wouldn't be Fantastic Four without costumes. They have very clingy costumes from the European fashion house Teabag and Camel Toe.
I think we have a serious problem.
The ending, a pitched battle in a city intersection, seems a little run out of money-y, but it sort of does the job. The 2005 era CG in a film that was realistically always going to be CG heavy is adequate. It does the job for the most part. A little dated, but it's okay. The cast work well enough in their roles, but on balance this is a film that's so very slight, perhaps even bland and inoffensive. Well, I suppose it did do what it set out to do, which was provide a Fantastic Four origin story where it set up the characters, their powers, the Baxter building, all ready to go for future adventures.
Yeah, I'm working on it. It's actually really difficult.
Actually, we do not know much more than you do at this point.
There would also be an extended version which would restore some scenes that fleshed out the characters just a little bit more, so that is probably the one worth watching if you feel the need to see for yourself. As a film, it's not especially hateable, but it does seem to be missing the spark of either the first two Spider-Man or X-Men films.
You believe this?
If there's a film that personifies adequate, middling, neither terrible nor great, watchable enough, pleasant enough, fun enough, but also reasonably forgettable, it's this film. I know a guy who had a Polaroid taken of him while he was watching the movie, so he'd always have some proof that he'd seen it.
I can't believe I'm doing this again.
Fantastic Four did okay at the box office, but it was okay enough for Fox to keep this team together for another film just 2 years later.
Name?
Stan Lee.
Yeah, nice try, buddy.
No,
Nice
no,
try.
really,
Nice
I'm
try.
Stan
Yeah.
Lee.
In 2007, Fantastic Four Rise of the Silver Surfer has the team preparing for Reed and Sue's often postponed wedding under the intense glare of the media and the military, who don't seem to be able to leave the team alone for more than 5 seconds.
Could you drop the force field, please?
We can't even. Oh, sorry. We can't even have a wedding without it turning into World War III.
Captain General Hager reluctantly needs Reed's help, but the wedding, the wedding.
See, I'm getting married this Saturday.
Meanwhile, there's this fella, the herald of the planet-eating entity Galactus. The Silver Surfer, as he's nicknamed, is supposed to point Galactus towards planets worth eating, basically a mobile Michelin guide on a surfboard. Surfer's tussle with the Human Torch leaves Johnny out of sorts, where he can inadvertently swap his powers with other members of the Quartet.
Reed, you better be able to fix this.
I'm right on it.
Oh, and Victor Von Doom is back, working with the army over the objections of Reed and company, where of course, Victor is still Victor and wants the Silver Surfer's board for himself, since the board is the source of his power. Surfer, for his part, does not like this job and rebels against Galactus. The world is saved, and the four have their powers back to normal. By normal, I mean Ben Grimm still has to be incredibly careful whenever the PA system plays "We Will Rock You" at a basketball game.
Hate to wake up one morning and find out she was killed in a rock slide.
I'll show you a rock slide.
Joining the first film's cast was Andre Braugher, while Lawrence Fishburne was the voice of the Surfer. Galactus here isn't a guy with a fancy waste paper basket on his head, but here he's a giant planet-killing cloud that looks to engulf the Earth in a massive space anus, or spanus. The cute conceit of the four swapping powers is used for both comedy and the film's big battle at the end.
It's clobbering time.
And of course there's another excuse for Sue being nude in public. The second film is a little less slight with higher stakes than the first film, but it's still relatively fluffy in tone for the most part. Rise of the Silver Surfer has more action than the first movie, and its CG is more ambitious, though of course it can all be distilled into a few animated gifs of Reed dancing in a nightclub. The second film cost a bit more to make than the first movie, but made a little less. Just enough a little less to make greenlighting a third film an unwise business decision. Not unwise as in hiring Charles Manson to punch up the dialogue for the Muppet movie, just unwise in that the law of diminishing returns had already kicked in. So that was it for this incarnation of the four, save for Johnny making a surprise appearance many, many years later. Chris Evans, though, would soon get another gig. I don't know what it is, you'll have to go and look it up.
I can do this all day.
In the meantime, Marvel Studios had launched what would become the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which would rule the box office for the bulk of the 2010s with whatever B-list characters they still retain the rights to after pawning off their star characters to other studios.
Which is really pathetic when you think about it.
Fox was still doing okay with X-Men movies, but with that Avengers money up for grabs, they tried again with another version of Fantastic Four in 2015.
Is basically runner-up for a baking soda volcano.
We were actually disqualified. The potato clock got second.
Josh Trank had had a hit with his found footage superhero movie Chronicle. It showcased a flair for telling a story about superpowers with a horror leaning on a very tight budget, and so he was brought in to direct a rebooted version of Fantastic Four.
He's stronger than any of us.
Yeah, he is. But he's not stronger than all of us.
This will be another telling of the origin story, though here the Quartet are all much younger. They're basically college-aged teens and in their early 20s.
If you can do that, work together, then you can change the course of history.
Reed Richards is a science prodigy who's offered a place at the Baxter Foundation, where they're looking to build a quantum gate which will allow travel to a parallel dimension. Ooh, exciting. Reed is working with Professor Storm's son Johnny, his adopted daughter Sue, and another prodigy, the cranky pants Victor Von Doom. The quantum gate works, but again, since this is the Fantastic Four, things will not go so well, and yes, the Quartet get their usual powers: stretchiness, flaming, invisibility, and angry guy cosplaying as a quarry. Back on Earth, they're being studied since their powers are scary, and Ben's not in a good place.
Reed, do something, please!
Reed decides to bug out, and then we skip ahead a while to find that some of them are working for the government.
They're not powers, they're aggressively abnormal physical conditions that we're gonna fix. Can you turn that off?
And what if they can't?
Reed does return to repair the quantum gate, and they find that Victor wasn't quite dead, but he's gone from merely being a cranky pants past being a curmudgeon, skips past the stages of misanthrope, Star Wars fan, and then lands on psychopathic killer.
It's clobbering time!
Then Reed, Sue, Ben and Johnny realise that they can defeat Doom only if they work together. At the end, everything's set up for more sequels, and the group brainstorm a name.
Why would we need a name?
Because we're a team now, and there's 4 of us, so we should come up with a name for it.
The tragedy of the 2015 version of Fantastic Four is that it's something that ended up really bad, but it didn't start out that way. In early parts of the movie, it's actually half decent. Takes a different spin on the origin stories, but then along the way fumbles like a quarterback whose hands have been liberally coated in butter.
This is all my fault. That we can agree on.
You can pretty much pinpoint when the film's promise completely evaporates, and that's pretty much when the team have their space oopsie. After that becomes more and more jumbled and disjointed, veering between cartoony CG battles and PG-13 level body horror. The tonal shifts here are so jarring that you'll need to see a chiropractor if you ever want to walk again. It had a solid cast of up-and-comers: Miles Teller, Kate Mara, Michael B. Jordan, Toby Kebbell, and Jamie Bell. But despite the cast, any charm the film had just evaporates by the halfway point.
We're about to make history.
Yeah, or die. Either or.
There were problems behind the scenes. Basically, Josh Trank was out of his depth on such a large project where he had admitted that he had no particular affinity for the genre or the characters.
This is it. This is your chance.
The rough cut of the movie leaned into the morose aspects of having your body reformatted. I mean, yeah, turning into a literal flame sounds like, if nothing else, something that would make returning poorly fitting clothes that bit more difficult.
Johnny, you need to listen to me.
I did listen to you, and that's what got me here in the first place.
All through principal photography, the film didn't have an ending, which, unusually, was left undone until the scheduled reshoots, which resulted in lengthy effect sequences cobbled together without much of Trank's involvement.
We need to stop Victor! He's the source!
And more importantly, a lot of wigs that don't match. Basically, they tried anything to rescue the project so that the money that Fox had sunk into the movie wouldn't be a total write-off.
I'm gonna need 10 minutes.
It didn't work, and Trank's name became mud so quickly in Hollywood that his involvement with any major studio projects, such as a Star Wars movie in the works, would quickly turn to vapor.
Screw those guys.
I had not seen the film since it came out, and watching it again, the film starts to gel in the early stages, sucking you into thinking that it would in fact be a half-competent retelling of Fantastic Four, just with a different twist. And then it pivots to rather chilling body horror, culminating in Doom just wrecking everyone. Then it just devolves into people just doing what they could to salvage the film without much energy or incentive.
It's not gonna stop! It'll create a black hole that'll swallow the Earth!
It started off fairly promising. It ended up as a really, really bad movie. a cursed project that gets curstier with a sense of chaos behind the scenes, leading to a movie that slowly starts to fall apart before collapsing under the weight of its own incompetence.
Might not be 10 minutes, could be a little less.
It's movie Jenga, where the idiot in the group starts by pulling out the pieces from the bottom. You idiot, Frank!
We're finished.
Of these 4 films, the first has no score since I've never been able to see it, apart from a few bits here and there. And those bits look terrible, like a fan-produced play put on at a convention in 1987. The second and third are fun enough, very light and frothy, somewhat enjoyable, but there's very little depth.
Okay.
The fourth is just a mess that is best buried in the backyard, though you'd better hope that the dog never digs it up.
Made it ugly.
I would say that the Tim Story films are at least a fun way to spend an evening or two, and of those I found the second film to be the slightly more enjoyable of the two.
It's complicated.
And then another 10 years went by. Fox was split up with Disney buying the assets of 20th Century Fox, meaning the X-Men, Fantastic Four, Deadpool, and whoever could now be incorporated into the MCU or rebooted. After the odd Fantastic Four tease, the Quartet will finally get another chance in the first steps, something that, at the moment before the film's released, I am looking forward to. So until the movie comes out, I'm quietly confident. But if you insist on a prediction... If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, leave a comment below, or check out some of our other videos. The answer is, and hopefully this won't be bleeped too badly, he will complete his master's degree in French literature of the 19th century.